Thanks to our Patreon members for helping to make this episode possible, and we're now available on all the major podcasting platforms. You can find more information at the links below. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another philosophical fireside chat, in which I discuss an anecdote or parable or passage from mythology and discuss what it might actually mean. Today, I know I just did one from the Mahabharata not too long ago, but here's another one. It's one of my favorite ones. I actually included this on a lecture on Sanskrit literature and history because it's just so great, and I think it highlights so many elements that we struggle with, and why if you're not Hindu, why this is what it means to be Hindu, and how you know you're not Hindu when you read something like this. This comes from the Adiprava chapters, I think 107, 108. From the Mahabharata. And this is, again, anytime you're dealing with these parables from Hindu literature, usually they just have to be sort of shortened a bit because they're so complex. They have such rich history. So, I apologize if I have to cut some of the subtleties and complexity out because they're so vast and rich. It's hard to keep them small. So, in any case, there was a famous Brahmin known by the name of Mandavya. He was conversant with all the duties and devoted to religion, truth, and asceticism. He had taken a vow of silence, and he sat in his hermitage with his arms upraised in observance of that vow. He had been sitting there for years when one day there came into his asylum a number of robbers with some gold they had stolen. They were being pursued by a group of police, or guards, was probably a better translation there. The thieves, on entering the hermitage of the holy man, hid the booty and concealed themselves before the guards came. But after that, the guards came in and, observing the holy man sitting under the tree, questioned him, saying, "O best of Brahmins, what have the thieves taken and where have they put it? Please answer us now." Of course, the Brahmin would not reply. So once again, they asked him again. The officers of the king, however, on searching the asylum, soon discovered that the thieves concealed there with the plunder. Upon this, their suspicion fell on the holy man, and they thought they would seize him and with the thieves and brought him before the king. So here we go. So the holy man is sitting there in silent meditation. He is not responding to their questions. He doesn't respond to the thieves. He doesn't respond to the guards. And so when they find the thieves there and the gold, the guards are like, "Hey, you're a bad person. We're going to take you before the king." So the king sentenced him to be executed along with the thieves. And the officers, acting in ignorance, carried out the sentence by spearing the holy man. And having speared him, they went to the king with the body they had recovered. But the holy man, though impaled and kept without food, didn't die. And the holy man, by his power, not only preserved his life, but summoned other holy men to the scene. And they came in the night in the form of birds, and beholding him engaged in his meditation, and with a spear through him, became plunged in grief. And he says, "O Brahman, we desired to know what hath been thy sin for which thou hast been made to suffer the tortures of impalement." And he says, so here we go. So this is almost a retelling of the Job story. Here we have an aesthetic wisdom, a holy man known for his devoutness and uprightness, falsely accused. They actually spear him. And he says, "In fact, none hath offended against me." The officers of justice, seeing him alive, informed the king again. The latter, hearing what they said, consulted with his advisors and came to the place and began to pacify the holy man. Right? So you're the king, you've speared him, and he doesn't die. And you're like, ooh, hey, sorry about that, is what he says. He says, O best of holy men, I have offended against thee in ignorance. Please pardon me. I did not mean to do it. Thus the king addressed the holy man, and the holy man would say, fine. He was not going to be angry with the king. But eventually, after some more events, he goes up to heaven and meets with the god of Dharma. So this is the god who oversees, these kinds of punishment. And he says, hey, what, pray, is the sinful act that I committed unconsciously, for which I am bearing this punishment of having this spear stuck in me and wandering around all the time in pain. And the god of Dharma says, "Oh, thou ascetic, a little insect was once pierced by thee on a blade of grass. Thou bearest now the consequence of the act." And the holy man said, "Hey, wait a second. Oh, tell me truly, when was this act committed by me?" And the god said, "That thou had sinned when you were a child." So the holy man says, "Wait, I don't remember doing that." And the god says, "Oh, you did this when you were a child." And so the holy man says, "That shall not be a sin which may be done by a child up to the 12th year of the age from his birth. The scripture shall not recognize it as sinful. The punishment thou hast inflicted on me, a venial offense, has been disproportionate in the severity. The killing of a Brahma involves a sin that is heavier than the killing of any other living being. Thou shalt therefore, O God of Dharma, be reborn among the men, and from this day I shall establish limit in respect to the consequence of an act shall not be sinful when committed by one below the age of 14. So, and then the god was reincarnated and had to live as a human in order to learn again what the correct rules of behavior and punishment are. So, end of parable. So, so many things here. One, if you compare this with the story of Job, it's so telling. So first you get here's a holy man, in comes the robbers with wealth. He ignores both the robbers and the wealth. He's not moved by that. Then comes the guards. He's not moved by the guards. He's taken his vow of silence. He's in meditation. Nothing in the world is going to move or bother him. He is not shifted by this. Again, I think it's a pretty obvious illusion here. He is a sacred, holy man. He is noted for his goodness, much like Job was. And he says, okay. So the guards finally get suspicious of him, and the king says, well, have him speared. So they run a spear through him. And if this doesn't work, again, always a bad sign when the person you've speared doesn't die. You're like, oh, uh-oh. So the king apologized, and notice, he doesn't get mad. He's like, okay, you did it in ignorance. I can see why you made the mistake. I'm not going to be angry with you, even though you just had me speared. So again, this sort of forgiveness of all this. And so the other holy men come to him, and they say, hey, what have you done to deserve this punishment? Whereof is the justice of this? And he's like, just like Job, he says, I have done nothing wrong. And so he finally goes up to see the god of Dharma and says, hey, what have I done wrong? And the god of Dharma says, you speared an insect, therefore you have to suffer in this life. It's totally inscrutable. Like, you can't always know the connection between your modern suffering, your contemporary suffering, and what's happened in the past. And in Job, God comes to him and says something very similar, but then finally just says, because I'm God, don't tell me. You don't know what's going on. You'll suffer if I say you'll suffer, and you won't suffer if I say you won't suffer. Right? End of story. There's no reason to it. But in the Hindu parable, the conclusion is the God is wrong. So just like we saw before, right, where you had these incarnated gods acting in limited, very human ways, here again is this notion that even the gods even the god of Dharma is in the cycle of Dharma, right? Even the powerful spiritual beings are not outside of these kinds of forces, and a truly great religious holy man might actually be clearer on what's going on than a god. And that message is quite profound in some ways, because it doesn't, one, of course, it completely upsets any moral order of absolute knowledge coming from God, because there's a lot of gods and they mess up all of the time. Like, one of the things the gods do throughout the Mahabharata is they mess up. So there's a problem number one from reading it from a Western perspective. Two is true holy men may be more knowledgeable and more clear on the nature of the world and of duty and ethics and morals and responsibility than the gods. So if you understand, if you've ever wondered why the holy men have such an important place in Indian society, one reason is because they are potentially as great and as knowledgeable, perhaps even more knowledgeable in some cases, than the gods themselves. So the line is very blurred. And it also means you have the opportunity to strive to achieve that kind of status. So, and that it is actually, you can meet someone who's done that. So again, trying to make it compared to the Western narrative, we say, oh, there's a lot of New Testament, particularly fundamentalist New Testament religions talk about, be like Jesus, be like Jesus. So the closer would be like, don't be like Jesus, be like Ed over there, because Ed is as great or greater than Jesus. And you can touch him, and you can talk to him, and you can see how he acts, and you can know directly. So it's curiously less. There's very limited faith when you're actually working directly with the enlightened being, right? There's not this distance abstraction. All of these kinds of very, very concrete. So it is this sort of the metaphysical map is completely rearranged in these Hindu stories. And the moral of this, of the notion that even the gods can get things wrong and need to come and learn. And it also, of course, has this continual notion of that's what we're here doing. We're learning, right? And we're in this process of continual eternal education, although theoretically at some point you can become enlightened and rise above this. Functionally, you're just in this continual cycle of learning, education, clarity, gaining knowledge, and it never ends, even for the gods. And by the way, this is why Buddhism that says, hey, you can actually break this cycle, was such a powerful response to the Hindu tradition. Because if even the gods are caught in this cycle of learning and rebirth, at some point the Buddha is like, well, how do you get out of that cycle? And it's like, oh, you create a new-ish religion, if you want to call Buddhism completely different from Hinduism, which is, theological debate. So again, one of my favorite stories, because it encapsulates the holy man who has been wrongly punished. How his people respond around him. You did something wrong. Same thing as the story of Job. Holy man punished, story of Job. But the response and the outcome completely different. And so I think it really helps, or at least it was one of the stories that really helped me go, oh, this is not just some slightly different sort of ecumenical, all the stories are the same, all the system. No, the moral, the ideals, the metaphysical principles, radically different. And they give, in some ways, I think, a much more human and earthy quality, if you're allowed to say that from such a crazy metaphysical story, than you do get in like the Old Testament or New Testament for that matter. And so I think it just interestingly highlights all those. So again, this is from the book of the Adi Parva, chapters 107 to 108. There's several versions of this you can find online because it's the Mahabharata, so you can read the full account there, which is, I just shortened it a little bit, tried to clean up the language. The translations will vary. And I hope you enjoyed that. Thank you very much.